All right. Well, welcome back to another Bass Juice podcast. This is one that I am super excited for because today we have one of the originals, one of the OGs of YouTube and just like big bait fishing, sharing your experiences guy, and that is Oliver Nye. Hey, that rhymed. But you guys know him, Oliver Nye of Big Bass Dreams. Awesome couple of YouTube channels, and he's a multi-species guy. Which I really appreciate because I think you just pick up so many different aspects of fishing when it comes to it. But today is really all about big baits. And we're not going to talk just about swim baits. I think when a lot of guys hear big baits, they automatically assume glide baits and big soft plastics. And we will talk about that. But I really want to kind of start off talking about some other types of big baits. And that's why I brought the big bait expert. So Oliver, how you doing today, man?
Doing all right, brother. I'm a little bit bummed because I originally had pushed it out to a little bit later this evening because as you can see over my shoulder, we've got a beautiful crespicular window of low light where I've been actually catching them on one of these big baits right at the end of the day, right off the dock on the house that we're staying on. But we had a pretty gnarly thunderstorm roll through right now. So here we are.
Yeah. I heard the rain right when you plugged in there. So no one likes to be throwing around big baits and slinging a graphite rod in the air when you got thunder rolling around. But yeah, man. So when it comes to big baits, let's go ahead and dive right on in. I really want to know from you because you've had so many different experiences with these bigger baits, and even like some smaller baits made off of these big baits. But like, what are some of your favorite, big baits outside of the glide baits, the big soft plastic swim baits?
Sure. Let's circle back and focus on the terms that are used interchangeably, right? Like I talk about this sometimes during some of the seminars at like the Columbus Fishing Expo or wherever I'm speaking on these subjects, and people have started to use the term swim bait to include pretty much everything big. And what I have to remind people is that a swim bait is defined by the swimming mechanism. And in this case, like you got a boot tail swim bait here. That is a swim bait, and to some people at the bottom end of that threshold of what you consider a big bait at 6 inches. But so is this. Okay, this is a 2-inch deuce swim bait, and that's absolutely 1,000% a swim bait.
Yep.
So, using that term is a little disingenuous. I feel like we could be a little bit more specific regarding as far as the way we discuss this topic, because I think it matters. There's a lot of subtle nuance in this style of fishing, and I think a lot of it gets kind of simplified or oversimplified, and the misuse of some of the terms can be confusing to some. Especially when you get on some of these colorful Facebook group pages. But anyways, there's all kinds of other big baits, right? Like you got big topwaters, and every genre of topwater that exists in the traditional realm of bass fishing, whether it's a popper like a Strike King KVD popper, or a stick, a walking stick bait like a spook or a sexy dog or whatever. Like there's a bigger variation of that now that trophy bass fishermen use to target bigger fish specifically. We've taken giant trevally design lures from the north coast of Australia and introduced them to the U.S. market here as a bass fishing lure. And when we first did a collaboration with this awesome up-and-coming brand called Cast Fishing, their U.S. division's based out of Florida, we got really excited about taking this balsa wood stick bait, and that's another like convoluted and oftentimes confusing genre of lure, because people look at that and they think, oh, you just walk the dog in a very methodical zigzag motion like you would a traditional topwater stick bait in the bass fishing realm. But really it's capable of so many other things in a presentation And that's one of the things that made it so appealing for us to do a Big Bass Streams collaboration color. And we actually ended up doing 2 or 3 of them with a couple on the dock that we haven't had time to get to. But it's funny, they obviously wanted to break into this bass fishing market here in the US because it's the biggest in the world.
Mm.
Right? Like that. Australia is a small country. The number of people that fish the Great Barrier Reef is even smaller.
Mm-hmm.
So they're looking to expand their product range and their impact and their brand. And they brought over a 20 and a 30 gram size, which is probably like a 4 and maybe like a 4.5 inch body size, which to a North American bass fisherman seems like a big lure. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's bigger than a full size spook. Like
Mm-hmm.
maybe going back to like what was that Excalibur version Super Spook? Remember that, a little bit bigger size?
Mm-hmm.
That was a big bait to most freshwater bass guys that I knew. And their smaller sizes are about in that range at 20, 30, 40 gram size. And they had just assumed that I wanted those smaller sizes. So when Mick asked me what sizes I wanted to run, I was like, all of them, because they make them all the way to 120 grams, which is like proper big, 10,
Mm-hmm.
11 inch. And he's like,
Wow.
are you serious? And I'm like, oh, absolutely. Like, this is big bass streams, not any bass streams. And I've had a successful run at catching bass on unorthodox baits, especially the bigger variety. And even now on this road tour that we're on, I'm doing my best to show them something that the local fishing culture is not.
Mm-hmm.
And it often includes going bigger or showing them a different genre of lure. Like I just had Riley bring in that bait that I've been catching him off the dock. You can see it's actually all nice and wet. But this is a topwater bird crawler,
Oh,
right? And this is a smaller version of the original that we released originally
this
from
one right
Defiant
here.
Fishing. Yeah, see, you got the big boy.
This is the big boy.
And
Yeah.
I designed that for largemouth.
Yep.
Okay, it's 6 inches long from tip of the nose to the tail, probably just as wide with the wings open, 4 ounces or so. Like it's not a small bait.
Mm-mm.
Like
No, it's not.
did you? I'm curious what your initial gut was the first time you pulled that thing out of the package. Like, what was
I
your feel?
Yeah, for me, when I pulled it out, I was just like exactly what you would think is like it's a big bait, it's a big presence on the water. I have not really thrown this, and it's because I just knew, I felt like I needed to be in the right situation. But the more that I got to look at it, the more that I've realized that it's, here's your little 6 inch, capsize type bait, really similar to a 6 inch mag draft. And you can see that, like they're pretty similar. I mean, obviously this has a bigger body, but full length wise, they are very similar. But yes, when I saw this, it's an intimidating bait for sure. And so and that's part of the reason why I haven't thrown it yet. But that was my first thing is like, wow, that's a bird, that's almost a duck, really. I mean, that thing is
1,000%, man. And I was inspired to design and build that lure going back to when I lived in Texas, and
mm,
just the amount of bird life on and around the water. I don't know if you've spent any time down there, but like they got these wild flocks of these grackles, which are
mm,
like a black bird. They're so obnoxiously loud, but they like swarm in the hundreds and thousands, and they come in the water, they drink. They're always flying around that, and then you got all those swallows nesting on the bridges at places like Fork or anywhere that has a bridge, including downtown Austin on Ladybird. You've got urban bat populations in that same body of water where literally like 2.5 million bats come in and out of that bridge every night.
wow.
And we'd be fishing in the late in the day and early in the morning, or even sometimes through the night, and occasionally you'd see one in the water, and one that made its way in there somehow, some way, and just came to the conclusion, like, man, these fish got to be eating these things more often than people are realizing.
Hmm.
And the success that we've been having has definitely, in my opinion, validated that hypothesis and theory.
Yeah.
And that initial hesitancy that you just described is also part of why we put the time and effort to build a slightly smaller bait that made it a little bit more manageable, and a little bit more appealing, because like the rod that I'm throwing it on is the rod most bass fishermen have.
Mm-hmm.
This is a St. Croix Warhorse. It's like a standard 7'5", medium heavy action rod that you throw, like a single hook bait, like a buzz bait, spinner bait, chatter bait, maybe a swim jig, or even light punching. Something with a moderate fast taper. Uh, Almost everybody's got that rod, and
Mm-hmm.
at 4.5 inches and 1.6 ounces, it is so much less intimidating than that big version.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a perfect example of how we can introduce a same category or lure style at a smaller size, even on the capsize, right? Because that's a bait that is available in a 7.5 inch size, a 9 inch, and a 12.
Yeah.
And to build that confidence and experience, most importantly, to lead people down this deep rabbit hole of trophy bass fishing, like it's important to be able to build on some fundamental learning opportunities at a smaller size. And even though it's much smaller uh, overall than the 6 inch, like it's not a small bait,
Mm-hmm.
and the bites it generates are not small. But it's also still getting crushed by 3 pound smallmouth off this dock. Like
That's crazy.
it's pretty wild to see time and time again the size of the fish that will take a swipe at these really big baits, these really big, obnoxious, like they definitely feel their presence. And in places like where I'm at here, in Vermont, upstate New York currently, that time we spent in Texas, like pretty much everywhere we go, those fish have been absolutely murdering. Those two baits in particular are probably the highlights. And especially for my clients that are looking to build that experience and confidence, they've been huge tools for me
Mm-hmm.
as someone that's trying to facilitate that ability to tie on that 6 inch version of that bird and do it with confidence and high efficiency, because you're going to get so much more engagement on the smaller end of a lure size. And
Mm-hmm.
even on that, cast OG and down under that I talked about, it was nice to have everything from a 20, 30, 40, 60, 75, 90, and 120 gram, because as an angler's experience and confidence grew, the more likely they were to tie on that next size up and stick with it, and also not blow it when they finally get a bite. Because as a general rule, the larger the size of the bait, the lower numbers of engagement I'm getting.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a corresponding trend of those fish being bigger on average.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I see a lot of people that jump into fishing, especially with that COVID bubble, that skip straight to the top. Because to me, like, trophy bass fishing, especially largemouth fishing, is probably some of the most challenging, if not the most challenging fishing you can ever do. And like you said, I'm a multi-species guy. We run a successful saltwater charter business back in California. I've been lucky enough to travel off the continent several times to pursue some bucket list fish. But at the end of it all, like, I find myself coming back to fishing the same lame lakes in Southern California because it's hard.
Yeah.
Those fish get pummeled. They've seen every bait that becomes trendy. They have been caught and released multiple times, and they are an absolute pain in the to fool. But when you fool one, that context makes it so rewarding.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Like, if it was easy, it wouldn't be special. At least that's my opinion.
Yeah. No, I think that that's a really good way of putting it. I think it's a really good, just the way that you've kind of structured things, and even with the lure design that you've had, because, one of the biggest things that I think guys struggle with is simply not getting bit on things, and they, if an hour passes and they haven't get bit, like, their confidence is gone. I mean, even when it comes to a more standard size bait like a jig, like, all of us start You hear a lot of guys talk about, throwing a 3/8 ounce, a half ounce, a 5/8 ounce jig, which is profile wise, it's a couple inches long, and it'll get bit, but you're not going to get near as many bites as you might with a Texas rig. And I've told people for years, like when it comes to fishing a jig, like if you don't have a lot of confidence in it, pick up a finesse jig, pick up a 1/4 ounce finesse jig. You're going to get a lot of bites. And then once you get that confidence, it's so much easier to step up to a 3/8 and a half ounce. And you've kind of built that same thing just within some of these, big baits where it's, hey, yeah, we have a 9-inch cap size, big swim bait, a big old bird like this. But sometimes it's so intimidating at first that you really just need to be able to go out there, get a few bites, and kind of move on. I know that for me, a number of years ago when I was really kind of wanting to fish a little bit bigger baits, and like you said, 6 inches kind of on the small end of like what you would probably consider big baits. Being a tournament guy, I feel like I kind of live in that 6 to 8 inch range with a lot of baits when it comes to big baits, mostly swim baits. But it took me a minute to even go from a 6-inch style like swim bait, like a mag draft or a capsize, to like the 8-inch, because although it's only 2 inches bigger, it's probably twice as much plastic in that bait. But now, after I got used to fishing that 8-inch, you look at the 6-inch and it just looks smaller. Like it literally just like mindset. Like as soon as you look at it, you're like, geez, that thing almost looks like a finesse bait. So it's kind of cool the way that you've structured things. I don't have any of the small birds yet, but I'm definitely going to be getting some. And I think that it's crazy that you're just sitting there on the back of your, on the dock on Lake Champlain, literally just casting out there and catching bass. And that's the other cool thing about big baits, is it's not necessarily always a big body of water boat fishing thing. Like there's a lot of guys who fish ponds that could be like really catching a lot of fish on birds and things like that are out of the ordinary. And I'm sure you've had some experience with that, fishing more really small lakes.
Yeah, it's been interesting watching this season progress, because we released these smaller birds through the expos, during the show season, that started in January and ran through the classic, which was towards the end of March. And I made sure I got a couple of our early production samples to some of our team members, just so they would have them in hand when I felt those windows of opportunity would open up. And generally, like, topwater fish for me are some of the most fun ways to catch bass. Like if I can see that eat like on top, like that visual element adds to just the overall experience. But for me, like that generally happens like on the low end, like when the water temps start creeping steadily and holding at 60 degrees, but it gets substantially better when it's closer to 65. And obviously holds pretty solid throughout the summer season, through this post-spawn period that we're experiencing a little bit now in the northern part of the country. But I sent one bird to my boy Jason, who lives in Dallas Fort Worth, and if you're familiar with that DFW area, dude, like they get ice storms, right? They get snowstorms and blizzards, and like we got stuck there for a week coming back from a Chicagoland expo a couple years ago.
Wow.
And the first week of February, he's sending me photos and videos of him busting their, like, in the break of a snowstorm. And I'm like, hold on, man. Like, okay, that had to be a fluke. And he just kept catching them. So even as much time as I've spent on the water over the years, I still find myself learning all the time and seeing like windows of opportunity open up when I previously wouldn't have thought it was a high percentage, idea to go out there and throw any of these baits in certain scenarios. And big baits in particular have proven to break these like mental molds that I've formed over the years. There's something about the size as a singular dynamic makes those fish behave out of the box. And it's taken hold. Like we've sold out of several batches of this bait, both through the retailers like Lake Pro Tackle, Tackle Shack Austin, Tackle Warehouse, and through the website. And at every expo it's sold out, because people that were familiar with that larger size bird you saw, if they had bought one probably had similar experiences to you. Didn't have a whole lot of confidence throwing that giant friggin' quacker all along the shorelines. But then this thing comes in so much smaller and unassuming side by side. It's like, oh, I could throw that.
Mm-hmm.
And the amount of success people are finding with this thing um, is more rewarding than anything. As you know, as a creator, as someone that put a lot of thought and effort into building this specific crawler, and
Yeah.
people of all kinds, kayak fishermen, bank fishermen, tournament guys are starting to unlock it because it definitely gets like good bites.
Yeah.
Like we had a nice 28-pound bag. She had a dirty 30 on Lake Austin on some like skinny looking like post spawn fish already, and I mean they were crushing it, man. Like it is so much fun, and I think you can see that if you go like to the Defiant Fishing social medias like Instagram, and you see how many different people from all over the country are just like speaking with this youthful exuberism because they're having so much fun with it. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's been everything, man. Like that's
Yeah.
why I try to put this podcast off just so I can go experience it again myself. Like
Yeah.
it's so addicting, and you know, it's I'm at a point in my career now that it matters to me that I catch these fish how I want to catch them, and I can experience fishing how I want to experience it versus just catching fish.
Yeah.
But you know, I've been doing this a long time, so my art is a little bit different than other anglers. You know, at the same time, like when we checked into this house the other morning, you know, I was just excited to be like accessible to water like this again, because where I came from, like a house like this on a lake that has, you know, potentially 8-9 pound bass on it, which are huge up here,
Yeah.
just doesn't exist. So I'm up at 5 a.m. because it's light like at 5:10 or something insane up here.
Mm-hmm.
And I just went down there, caught a couple panfish, and then I was just watching on the dock, and I was like, oh, there's like a 4 1/4, 4.5 pound post spawn largemouth just kind of chasing these bluegill around. Not trying to eat them, you know, just trying to like punk them or whatever, just be territorial. And I'm like, oh, I got this sweet little BFS set up from Luz. Let me just put on some like 18-pound, you know, smooth casting braid and maybe a little Ned head, and put a little 4-inch ultra hog on that thing. And I was like, I'll just fire it out there. And like on the second cast, I could feel like some of this cabbage that's starting to grow.
Mm-hmm.
That cabbage is nice. I wish we had that stuff in California, man. Like baits fish through it beautifully. Like
Mm-hmm.
it rips through clean. It doesn't really like foul the bait and ruin your presentation. And on that second cast, I went through a little bit of cabbage, and I was like, ah, man, I got some more cabbage. And I leaned into this, 3-power rod, which is a bait casting rod that's an ultralight, to throw this little, 3/16 ounce Ned head and a little 4-inch creature bait, and the head shake. I was like, oh crap, like that's not lettuce or cabbage or whatever that is. And dude, that thing was like a big headed post spawn, like 5.5 pounder. Like it could have been like a 7 a month
Gosh.
ago. And these elephants will eat peanuts at times.
Mm. Yeah.
And it's interesting because I just got off the phone with another colleague of mine. He's on our Big Bass Stream team. He's based out of the Carolinas, and his name is Fred Stepp. If you guys are curious, go check him out. He is underappreciated in this big trophy world, but he's been at this a long time too. And this 6'5" giant of a man makes all of these big bass he catches look so small. And you understand perspective, and you look at his content, and you should see the size of these spots he just texted me on the bird. Like literally
Yeah.
right before we jumped on here, I'll show you just real quick on my phone.
Yeah.
He's been catching like
Wow.
big spots, man, like big ones.
Yeah.
Those are birdfish.
Really. And that's on the 4.5-inch bird.
Yeah, but he loves the big one.
Yeah.
He loves the big one. He's caught several double-digit class fish on it
Yeah.
down in that Carolina region. He fishes like North Carolina, South Carolina, North Georgia kind of region. But he's an interesting cat because as much as he loves throwing the big bait, he also really loves like BFS stuff.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
kind of like two ends of the extreme, right? Like that experience I had catching that big-headed post-spawn fish on that ultralight tackle was challenging in a different way because of the light tackle. And for me, I put a 9.8 pound leader or something on that. To me, dude, that's like floss these days, because I'm of the mindset, I'd rather not get bit than hook the right fish only to get my ass kicked by it.
Yeah.
Like I've lived enough of that heartbreak over the years, because I grew up a very finesse oriented light line like fisherman, because I was so focused on just getting bit, right?
Hmm.
Numbers, and then trying to, like, measure my best five in a tournament situation, this imaginary one, right? Growing up, because
Yep.
I don't know how old you are, man, but I'm definitely what I term like the new OG generation. Like, we've been at this a long time. We were around before, like, the way fishing culture is now, and back
Yeah.
then, like, you had a few different avenues to make it in the fishing world, and that was maybe like a journalist, like a writer, or hosting a TV show or something, um, in the industry, working for a tackle brand,
Hmm.
uh, as a guide,
Hmm.
or as a professional tournament bass fisherman.
Hmm.
So that's what I was trying to build myself up towards as a young teen, and even into my early adulthood, because the things that you do, the things that I do now, and other guys, this didn't exist.
Yeah.
So I was hyper focused on just getting out there, getting as many bites as I could. I fished 5 pound maximum ultra green, like that was my jam, and of course I would get more bites. And looking back on it, I probably got more bites because of how that thinner diameter monofilament affected the swimming action and presentation of my lure, more so than the visibility of
Hmm.
that line in certain situations. I'm not saying that visibility wasn't a factor in all those situations, but we've used the advances in technology available us today in tackle. I'm throwing that bird on 55-pound Defiant smooth casting braid, which we designed to be a thinner diameter 8 carrier braid that handles like a much thinner diameter mono or fluorocarbon. So that lack of drag is allowing those baits to perform at a different capacity than someone fishing straight mono or fluoro of the same test.
Yeah. I
That
gotta ask you too, a couple things. One, like you said earlier, I think it's crazy that, like you said, big baits almost like they make fish act in a completely different way. Like you could cast so many baits at the exact same fish, and then all of a sudden you present them with a big bait of some sort, whether that's a big bait, a big swim bait, and it just simply like causes them to do something different. And I think that it's interesting that you were talking about your buddy in the Carolinas there, because I've fished down in Georgia and North Carolina, South Carolina a lot. I fished in those herring lakes, and
Mhm.
down there a lot of things, especially when it comes to spotted bass, is like speed oriented. Like you
Oh,
want to be bringing stuff almost as fast as you can. And so for him to be able to present those type of fish with something that is not moving quickly on the water, I find it just crazy. And like you said, it almost makes them act in a totally different way, in a totally different manner. But I do want to actually get into the bird just a little bit, because is it as simple as it sounds to fish? Is it casted out and just, is it a slow type of reel across, or do you do anything specific with that bait? Do you kill it? Is there anything that you do with that when you're working that bait?
yeah, that's a funnily or funny timed question, because we just dropped a tackle breakdown video on it on the Big Bass Streams channel that goes into a deep dive, so I can save us 16 minutes of that video, right? That I worked really hard to put together, but I'll touch on some of it here.
Sure.
It is almost stupid proof.
Yeah.
All right, like the way Fred fishes it is honestly kind of boring to me. He fishes it just fast enough to get it to go bloop, 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 bloop. And I like doing all kinds of wild stuff, right? Like there's like a sweet spot in the higher band of speed where I present this thing, where it gets almost frantic looking, like it's
Mm,
panicking, like trying to get out of the water unsuccessfully. Like it's right before it blows out. Like you
mm,
can't fish this bait like at a true burn like you can with that capsize, right? You can take that capsize and virtually turn that handle as fast as you want, and it's going to swim true. But this is a topwater crawler. The angle and the pitch of the wings affects the roll. We designed this bait to have an oscillating action, which makes it different from virtually any crawler on the market. And he catches really big ones though doing that. It's a very subtle, simple presentation. When I put this in the hands of somebody that hasn't fished it yet, honestly, we always check the temperature of the room. Right, every day is different. Especially if you ever fish Lake Champlain this time of year. Holy crap, man! It's like fishing a new body of water every day. The wind blows out of the north today. It's going to blow out of the south tomorrow. It's 90. It was literally 90 degrees today, and I was cooking. It was 40 degrees in this region last week. It's always in flux, right? It's not a static environment. And the mood and willingness of these fish to make a play on any of these lures is going to change not only day by day, but like hour by hour. And frankly, like I can feel that sun open up out of the clouds, and in that moment, understand that there's a window of opportunity potentially for how I like catching these fish. So you always got to stay on your toes, and that has really taught me to be variable in my presentations with every lure, including the bird. But generally, dude, if it's good, which it's about to get good, all you got to do is chuck and wind it.
Yeah.
Fire it up there, like on big flats, like throw it anywhere you would throw anything else. Like if a bass would live on it, like I think one of the reasons why this dock is so good is I can see a ledge, right? It goes like a gradual, like nothing to like probably 3 or 4 feet. And then, I can see a very definite break. And when I throw that Ned rig out there, I can definitely like count my bait down 15, 20 feet easily. And a couple of those smallmouth I caught the other night shocked me because they were definitely over that deeper edge. And I've had enough experience over the years to see these fish and now confirm with forward-facing sonar and fishing like alloy flakes like up here. Like smallmouth, largemouth spots will absolutely come up 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35 feet to eat a topwater.
Crazy.
And they do it. They do it time and time again, and they shoot right back down afterwards. It's wild.
Yeah.
So, I was throwing that thing on just a long bomb cast on a straight retrieve, medium pace. And when it's good, that's all you got to do. But where it gets really fun for me is when I feel like I have to get really precise and technical. Like I posted a short little clip of a couple fish I caught on Champlain the other day. Fishing has gotten tough. Like I think this crazy up and down weather has got them like into that weird post spawn funk already. We're having to work for all of our bites. So it's not like we're just going out there and chucking and winding aimlessly and just catching bass every which way. Like we're having to work for the bites that we get. And, I enjoy fishing when it's like that. Cause like, once again, there's a sense of accomplishment there. Right. But I'm having to put this bait like strategically and very precisely on like rock walls where I may feel some of these birds like to nest, and occasionally it'll fall in the water, or around overhanging limbs, right? You see terrestrial birds love to land on overhanging trees and branches and bushes and stuff, especially to take a drink. So I'm trying to get this ounce and a half bait roughly very accurately in these tiny little pockets and minimize splash. Because I feel like when you're fishing it in that manner, like closer proximity, target oriented, like places where someone would like flip a jig, and presentations that you're trying to be so stealthy, like you don't want that thing making any splash. And I can do that with this bait, and it's challenging to have those mechanics, and it keeps me focused, and that's part of the fun of it all. Is like just like getting dialed in and like. Like, oh man, that was a badass cast, and you go to Twitch and boom, like, oh, I forgot I was kind of like trying to catch a fish here. I was so focused on presenting this lure in the most subtle, ninja-like way I can, and it matters at times. And in those situations, this is where you see a lot of the variation in the presentation. Right, hits the water. I generally like to actually make commotion with the bait in the water. Like the moment it's in the water subtly, I'll make commotion, if that makes sense. Like it's different than it like plopping in the water, boosh, I
Yeah.
feel like that could be a potentially spooking dynamic versus if you can get that thing to enter the water like Greg Louganis back in the day from those diving boards. Definitely aging myself with comments like that. But then create a tension with the lure itself. You'll get what I call like freebie bites. You land on their head and they're just going to react to it the same way Riley starts swatting at a wasp buzzing around her head.
Yeah,
Uh,
and that's kind of like, you think about the way that a bird might hit the water. It's birds are very light, and when they hit the water, it's probably not a great big splash, but they're probably immediately trying to crawl their way out.
like, get me the
So
hell out of here.
yeah, they're trying to get out of the water. I mean, so it makes sense. And that's actually a question I had for you, especially when it comes to like the bird and other big baits, like for example, like you see guys throwing big rats and stuff like that. You see it a lot more again out west, which seems to be just big bait central. But anyways, do you think that a lot of these presentations are mimicking like actually what they are? Like, do you think a lot of times, like I hear you even saying it, like I'm trying to look for these areas where I think birds actually may be. So do you think that a lot of times when you find the best bite, it's because they're actually feeding on that? Or do you think that there are sometimes too where, you could just throw it by a bluegill bed and it's just going to be intriguing enough to a bass that they just come up there and hit it?
I think both those scenarios play out.
Mm-hmm.
People have looked at bird mimicking lures as gimmicky for a long time. Even when a legend of our sport, Aaron Martens attributes to his observing bass eating baby coots in the reeds at Havasu in a Bassmaster Elite event. He might not have been catching them on a bird lure per se, but he was targeting actively feeding bass that were consuming small birds.
Yep, I remember that.
And you can go both ways with it, right? And frankly, like, I might have felt that same way until I started testing these crazy hypotheses in my head. Or what is it, hypothesis? What's a plural of one, of hypothesis?
That
Like,
sounds right. This isn't a grammar podcast. It's just say
but
whatever you want.
yeah, that's a beautiful thing about fishing is it's an ongoing scientific experiment for me. And at home, like, we have these steep canyon rock walls in our damned canyon reservoirs, and we get these swallows that nest on them. And one day, man, like, I was watching these adults like fighting each other, in the air, and they'd like tumble down to the water, hit the water, fly back up, and of course, I'd see an occasional like baby bird fall in the water, and I'm like, I got a bunch of frogs here. Let me throw like a brown one up against that wall. And my buddy, everybody has to make that comment and sneer and just be a dick about it, right? Like, oh yeah, you're an idiot. Like, they don't eat birds. And dude, first cast on that rock wall, like twitching that freaking Spro bronze-eye frog in that brown pattern, boosh, and it just kept happening, and it just kept happening, and it got to the point where I started phasing out frog-colored frogs.
Yeah.
Like, I threw panfish, like bluegill and red ear patterns, to fish around these bluegill beds that are everywhere now, and bird patterns, whites, blacks, browns, some yellows, and they keep biting them. So who's to say that it doesn't happen? And it's interesting seeing, with social media, people are so able to share random things like a photo of two bird feet sticking out of a throat or a regurgitated bird in a live well. Like, it happens a lot.
Yeah.
And you talked about rat fishing, and I think that's a similar dynamic. Like, predators overall are very opportunistic, right? Like, if you are willing to try eating different things, your odds of survival and passing on your genes are that much higher. And I think there are other cases where, like you said, like fishing this thing over, bluegill or brim beds or whatever you want to call sunfish might just trigger a reaction because it's there and it's vulnerable. And dude, bass are a-holes, like, smallmouth and spots especially. Like, actually, I missed one last night that I think punched this thing, and it's the first miss I've had in weeks on this bait. I think he just punched it with his mouth closed, like they love to do sometimes.
Yeah.
It scared the crap out of me, but I was thankful for that experience. Like, that heart jumping out of your chest is awesome when it
Yeah.
comes through a fishing rod.
Yeah.
Uh, but rats and rodents are common in different bodies of water, right? They're not so common in Southern California,
Hmm.
but like up here throughout this upper like northeast that we're at, and we're going to be traveling back through the Midwest, and I see the same thing there. Like we see all kinds of aquatic small mammals, right? There's beavers, which are probably on the bigger side, but maybe they could take down like a small like infant beaver. But like you got all those small weasels and minks and fishers that are swimming around. You see snakes quite a bit. And what does happen on the West Coast is when we get these years of drought, our lakes fluctuate down 20, 30, 50, 100, 200 feet in the really
Jeez.
bad years, right? And that exposes a lot of like what would be humps, and long tapering points and saddles and all this stuff. But as that water rises, those humps become islands.
Hmm.
Guess what was living on that hump before it flooded?
Yeah.
You got all kinds of voles,
Yeah.
gophers, rats, and mice. Like all of those terrestrial mammals get flushed out of their like homes. And I've actually got video like during like some of these wet seasons, and like they're scampering to the back of the transom, trying to like get out of the water just because like they're gonna drown.
Yeah.
And it's like these fish definitely respond to a rat style bait in that specific scenario. So why wouldn't they do the same when there's dozens or hundreds or thousands of birds in and around the water? And before we left Champlain a month ago to go to upstate New York and fish Cayuga and St. Lawrence River and the Finger Lakes area, I think the second to last day, there was just a steady warming trend, and that water had been in the low to mid to finally like the high 50s, and I finally got like 60 and a half, 61 degrees in the afternoon. But pulling up to the launch ramp was a pair of Canada geese with three goslings
Hmm.
waddling off the ramp, and I'm like, oh, that's a sign.
Yeah.
And sure enough, I tied the baby goose bird on, fished around the corner of that launch ramp, and I caught a smallie within the first 10 minutes. And then got a couple other bites throughout the day because that's an addicting bite. Like I spent way too much time throwing it, but I had a blast catching those three fish on it.
Yeah. That's cool. That's really cool. And it just, man, I love that you keep kind of talking about just the feeling of it. It reminds me a lot, like you said, like when you first got into fishing, I feel like everywhere you went, when you got to fish, you were just so excited to be out there and be fishing. And whatever for me, it was just growing up, going to a new pond, going to a pond I'd never been in, literally walking to ponds, looking at Google Earth, riding my bike. Like every time you got to go to a new place, it was so awesome. And even nowadays, like I do a lake break video on this channel, and like part of that reason is like I just love going to new bodies of water. I don't love seeing the same thing over and over. And I think when you're throwing baits, these big baits, it's just like there's just an excitement the entire time. And to me, it also, like, I don't know anything about golf, but the one thing that I heard one of my buddies say one time is that like you come back for that one shot that you had, like in a round of 9 or 18 holes. Like you come back sometimes for that one shot that you made that was like dead on. And I feel like big bait fishing sometimes is exactly that. Like you may not go out and, like you said, catch 50 fish a day on some of these baits, but if you get 3 bites, 4 bites, it's a freaking blast. Like it keeps you coming back to do it. And most, a good portion of the time, they are better than average fish. Like you said, you are out there big bass hunting. It's not, what'd you say? Not every bass streams. It's big bass streams out
Any
there.
bass streams?
Many bass streams. Yeah. So it's just a cool, and it's always just, I love that experience. Like those are the experiences that just hook you on fishing in a way that, I don't know. I know that for me, I can remember some of my first like bigger baits, which I still don't throw like big baits. Like mine are like 7-inch swim baits, or like where I top out pretty much right now. But 8-inch, I guess, would be the biggest. But I know that that's still nothing for what you guys do a lot out there in the West.
Yeah, let's take it back, right? Like Megabass was an important partner. I feel both ways for 6 or 7 years of my career, and one of my first baits that I really dove into was the mag draft.
Mm.
This is going back to 2000, gosh, 13 or 14 maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever that year was that Casey Ashley won the classic on Hartwell when we were at the
Mm-hmm.
expo. And I saw that 10-inch version of that bait in the case, and at the time nobody was fishing that bait. So I got my hands on them. This is when I was fishing in Texas at the time, and holy crap, man! The drawing power, the way fish would clobber that thing, and not even giants, like 5 pounders, were
Yeah.
all over that thing. Uh, it was a beautiful arrow because at that time those fish hadn't been conditioned to it yet.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously I had the other two sizes as well, and I found the 10 as was actually much more effective than the 8,
Wow.
even on like 3-4 pounders. Like
Really?
that size I felt was a factor, right?
Yeah.
The overall profile of the lure, the water displacement. Like I'd have clients in Texas, and sometimes they'd be younger or less physically able, whether they were just smaller in stature or just weren't used to throwing a 6 ounce bait for hours at a time. Female anglers would struggle sometimes. So naturally, I was like, oh, we'll put the 8-inch in your hands. Like it'll be easier for you to manage and fish throughout an entire session without wearing out. And thinking like, oh, you'll probably catch more fish based off of one of my earlier statements to open up this podcast, right? Like the smaller the bait, generally the more engagement you're going to get. And I always have that escape route, right? Like that little caveat, like generally,
Generally.
because that was a situation where time and time again, fish would literally swim past the 8-inch to come engage with the 10.
Mm.
And it's like, what the hell?
Yeah.
So it took a while before I really started gaining confidence in specific other usages and scenarios with that 8-inch mag draft. And when I would tie the 6-inch on, I was so freaking annoyed. Do you want to know why? Because it just kept catching dinks.
Oh
Like,
gosh.
and to us, we're trophy hunting in this time frame. So
Yeah.
anything under 7 is a dink.
Yeah. Jeez.
Right? So it's like 3 pounder, 4 pounder, 3 pounder. Like, oh my God, dude, I'm spending more time unhooking your freaking 3 pounders and we should be, that we could be throwing that 10-inch and trying to coax a bite from a real one.
Yeah.
But, if I was a tournament focus at the time, I mean, I might have found gold, which,
Mm-hmm.
Many people have found over the years.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always a perspective thing. To me, because of my mindset and what our goals were in that 2015 2016 season specifically, I was trophy like focused. So 6-inch and even the 8-inch weren't applicable.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but depending on what you want to experience through your fishing, it's nice to have a size range like that. And I know that 8-inch was probably a big jump for you from the 6-inch.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that 7.5-inch cap size is kind of like a nice in between.
Mm.
So
Yep.
even here at Champlain on that first run and those like cold water temps and fishing being tough, like fishing was really, really hard. Like most guys were not having numbers days on just anything they tied on from their tackle box. Like I found 3 or 4 specific baits and like a couple specific colors that we could have consistent, repeatable success with during that first run. So every time I would kind of experiment and try to branch out from what was working, those fish shut me down real quick. And I'd pick up a 6-inch mag draft and like the 4 or 5 colors that they were responding to. I'm sorry, with the cap size, and they'd go back to eating it. So eventually, I got tired of catching them on the 6-inch. So I stepped up to the 7.5 and say, all right, this is my first opportunity to really put in some time with the 7.5, because normally I skip that size to go to like the 9-inch because it's so much bigger, right? Like those early experiences with that 10-inch versus 8-inch mag draft weigh heavily in my mind. And I give it a shot. Holy crap, man! Like the same size fish were willing to eat the 7.5-inch, but they ate it with a lot more enthusiasm.
Passion. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was skipping that thing around like the 6 inch, and I was
Yeah.
like, oh damn, this 7.5 inch skip's freaking awesome. Like, and frankly, once you kind of cater to the little bit heavier weight, with a bigger rod, a little bit heavier line, 300 size reel instead of the 200, I could fire that thing in the exact same places I was throwing the 6 inch. Because here's something that I've encountered over the years: we can absolutely wear out our own bites.
Hmm.
Forget all about the hole buzzards, as Ben likes to call them. All right, if you fish the same body of water in the same spots over and over again and catch them the same way, you're going to wear that population of fish out. Like,
Yep.
you're going to catch the willing ones, the dumb ones, and you kind of got to stay. I've always had to stay ahead of myself because
Hmm.
I've seen it. I've had buddies try to jump on the boat and fish the way they saw me catch them the day before. And it's like, man, you're already behind the 8 ball. Like, I already wore those fish out.
Yep.
Like, so having a similar lure style in different sizes and even different color shades, right? Even with the bird, that was an interesting observation that I had one day with my man Caleb, who booked me for a glide bait fishing training session because he really wanted to deep dive into the glide bait. And we spent the first day committed to it. But those fish, dude, those fish have been pummeled by glide baits.
Yeah.
Some jerk from California came out there 10 years ago and put a bunch of videos out there, and inspired a lot of the locals to tie on a giant bait and chuck them at those fish. And I'm telling you, those fish were not as eager as they were when I lived there. And I was like, what they haven't seen is this guy.
Yeah.
And while he was fishing that glide up front, I'd be on the back of the boat and not fishing, water and taking away shots from him. So he's got every shot and every cast that he wants to make. And I'm just even pitching this thing 10 feet out from the back of the boat sometimes. And douche, douche. He's like,
Jeez.
dude, that's a good one. I'm like, yeah, I know. And it's like, all right, man, give me one. And we ended up, crushing him, and it became his new favorite lure.
Yeah.
This is a dedicated big bait enthusiast, right? Like, he's got all the things, like all the custom swim bait rods, all the hype big baits, like, and he's good with them. Like, it wasn't that he didn't have the ability to get bit on the glide. It was just a situation where those fish had become highly conditioned to it, but they hadn't seen this thing.
Hmm. Yep.
And he took it home, and he's still sending me videos and pictures of 5 to 8 pound fish in Louisiana that he's crushing.
Yeah.
And
One, and I think it's we see that time and time again in bass fishing when new baits come onto the market that bass in general haven't seen. Like, you just think about the chatterbaits, the whopper ploppers. Like, when they come out, like, bass do crush them for a while. And that's kind of also why I didn't really want to talk specifically and constantly about glide baits and big swim baits, although they're great baits. Like, they have really gone eastward. Like, I feel like everyone I mean, there's definitely a population of people that don't throw them, but I feel like a lot of people are throwing them these days. Like, every tournament fisherman that I know, like, they have a box of glide baits these days. Like, they have
sure,
them, but they don't have a box of birds. They don't have something that literally is to me is kind of like, again, chatterbaits when they came out, whopper
yeah,
ploppers when they came out. Like, you literally just told us how you were casting right behind somebody fishing a glide bait. And even in that part of the country, who knows how many of those fish have seen glide baits, and you're just sitting there crushing them. And so I love that. I mean, it gets me pumped. Like, I'm very pumped, like, especially with the season that we're going into, like you said, summertime. Like, we're in that post spawn time where it's like they're already starting to hit top really good. So I'm like, man, I'm pumped. I need to get my hands on one, because I mean, I got this big one, but I'd love to get that 4.5 inch for sure.
yeah. I think you would definitely have a lot of fun with the smaller version. We actually just got a restock yesterday, so they're available on the Defiant Fishing website now. And I'm going to talk to the team, and we'll do a Bass Juice podcast discount code for your viewers,
Oh,
if they
nice.
want to jump into it.
Heck yeah.
So let's just do Bass Juice should just bass juice as a code that work?
That works for me. I mean,
All
shoot,
right.
on the spot, bass juice on the Defiant. What's the website called?
It's defiantfishing.com, and that'll
All
be
right.
good for any of the products. Obviously, the Big Bird, we've got the 210, 247 swim bait, which is a very popular soft swim bait. We got the braided line that we fish exclusively. We got a soft casting and a heavy cover fluorocarbon, as well as a shock leader fluorocarbon. We got some innovative stuff like, yeah, there you go.
There we go. 210 right there.
And once again, like that 210 is the baby bird to the full size bird of the 247.
Yeah.
Like you want to build confidence and learn that category of swim bait, you're going to get probably 10 bites to 1 in most scenarios with that 210 versus the 247, especially in the upper Midwest or the Northeast or wherever you're at. Like even here, you know, when I came up here to try to fish this pre-spawn window for largemouth for the first time in my life, like I was like, okay, like if I go with the 247, I'll definitely appeal to the one that I'm looking for, right? Like an 8, 9, hopefully a 10, 11 pounder up in this part of the country, which would be a mega. But the 210 would allow me to also get more engagement to piece the puzzle a little faster, right?
Yeah.
Those 3s, 4s, and 5s are showing me where they live and what their kind of willingness level is. Like that's more information for me to adjust and look for that one big bite.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, don't be scared by it. I've caught a 14-inch largemouth on that thing.
Yeah, I believe it. I believe it. I got this out because I had one and I knew we were having you on, but I also wanted to know, like, because this is it's a different, it's more of that like wedge style, which I'm not like, I've always been under the impression that the wedge style baits are more like a cold water thing, but I really want to know, like, you know, from you, like when do you see to be the optimum time to fish a bait like this one right here, which is the 210 that we're talking about?
Sure. Let's go back several years because I think that attitude might have stemmed from this video that I watched from a very prominent creator with a huge audience. And he pretty much said that boot tails will only get bit in warmer water and that wedge tails would only get bit in cold water.
Mm-hmm.
And man, if fishing has taught me anything, like there are no absolutes. There's no black and white, just a crap load of gray. Lots and lots of shades of it. Right. So I've had success with the inverse in so many scenarios across so many different regions where I'm just like, that's a bunch of horse shit. And utilizing that style bait in the Midwest in the summer is where I've had some of the most fun.
Really?
Like ripping that thing around. And see, this is where the benefit of being a multi-species guy comes into play. That became a deadly big pike and muskie bait for me.
Yeah,
you want to talk about conditioned fisheries? Tell me what muskie fishermen have tied on their deck in virtually every circumstance. Some kind of double cowgirl freaking inline spinner and a Medusa or some kind of, you know, whatever that category of big soft rubber is. So, you know, another catch and release fishery where these fish have opportunities to be conditioned.
Yeah.
And I would come into all of these iconic muskie fisheries, and while I was there, I was getting more follows, more bites, more engagement, and more fish than these hammers fishing the traditional stuff. It's like, how many times are you guys going to show them the same 5 baits?
Yeah.
And one thing I learned is like those guys like to rip that big soft bait, that like those double or triple, quadruple tentacle, like, you know, 10 to 12 inch hunks of rubber. Mm-hmm. So it's a big sweeping motion, and it gets that bait to flare, and then it comes to a stop and slowly sinks right before you rip it again. So I started catching big pike and muskies doing that with the Defiant swim baits on a 130-pound fluorocarbon leader, mind you. And you know what kept happening? Bass kept eating it.
Gosh.
Smallies and largemouth.
Yeah.
Eating off of a 130-pound leader. And I was like, bass like this too. Gosh. So I started utilizing this sweep and rip technique on bass fisheries everywhere I've gone. Mm-hmm. So, you know, if you fall into the trap of absolutes, right? Another misnomer with that style of bait is, man, all you have to do with that bait is cast it out, let it sink to the bottom, and just slowly wind it, slowly roll it back to the boat. Cool. So how many times have they seen that now?
Yep.
So I go the other way, man. Like,
ripping it.
Yeah, rip the crap out of it, burn it. Right?
Yeah.
Like, take those top hooks out, rig it with bottom hooks, trebles. So that does a couple things. That helps hook those fish feeding up from the bottom, but it also creates a little bit more ballast and weight. It will burn well with those top hooks, but now your center of gravity is up high, right? And that slow sink especially is a little bit more susceptible to being top heavy. So simple adjustment, let's go with a single or a double treble hook on the bottom, and that helps keel that bait. And there are bites, like, I mean, you've got to have a bite in your area where they just smoke a spinnerbait burned at Mach 5.
Yep.
I do the same thing with that thing. So I'll point the rod tip just like right at the water or barely above it, whatever the adjustment is to overcome the dynamics of your line, the drag, if it's dead calm or if there's some chop, just to keep that bait from popping like through the surface of the water, pushing that V wake like you would with a spinnerbait, like bulging a spinnerbait.
Yep.
Bro, some of the most violent bites.
Wow.
And
that's that's what the 210 too, right?
Yeah.
Or the bigger one. That is so crazy though. I mean, like you said, I mean, I've always thought like this, like literally even when I got it, I'm like, oh, this must be like that cold water style bait. Literally exactly what you said. Creep it along the bottom. Like
it is. But it's not limited to that. That's the thing, right? Don't limit your application of any of these lures.
Yeah.
And an adjustment from that slow, steady wind is to actually fish it more like a football jig with lots of pauses.
Yeah.
Crawling it until you feel that rock. Like, if this is the rock and you're swimming, and then you hit the rock, you can feel that rock and that bait kind of like teeter-tottering right on the backside of that rock, just like a football jig. Just let it marinate there for a little bit. What's beautiful about those baits is they sit perfectly upright on the bottom. So it continues to be a very natural presentation, especially in cold water scenarios. Like, this is something I make people look for in those seminar tanks. Like, generally they have yellow perch in those tanks. What have you seen every single one of those yellow perch doing during those expos? Not a damn thing.
Yeah.
They're sitting on the bottom.
Yep.
Almost motionless. So it's something that they're used to seeing. And, if you fish a jig or a crankbait like I have my whole life and have gotten hung up and experience what happens if your bait pops free all of a sudden, that triggers bites. So we've had that happen time and time again with that bait. There's a bite on Clear Lake with a client one time. They would not bite that 210 unless you snagged it first.
That's nuts.
Yeah, it's a bunch of volcanic rock. So it's like a bunch of craggly kind of sticky stuff. And that bait comes through cover surprisingly well. Like, when I first got the prototypes when I was living in Texas and fishing like Lake Fork, and if you've ever been there, dude, it's like an underwater forest, right? Like, I'm going to lose this thing on the first cast. I could probably count on one hand how many baits I've lost to a snag. I mean, I carry a couple of good lure retrievers too, but generally it works its way free. And if you look at the nose of that bait, the line tie and entry is a big part of that. Right? The other options have line ties on top of the head, right? Like a 90-degree jig hook.
Yeah.
So that lends to wedging into rocks, especially a little bit more, and it causes the bait to roll into wood. That bait, if you just stick, if it's like fishing a square bill, if you just fish it steady, it won't hang. It's the moment you stop, and it might roll over slightly or something, and that's what allows those hooks to catch potentially. But even then, like in that scenario, we'd cast out, let it sink all the way to the bottom, and literally just drag it until you could feel it kind of catch a rock and hope that it caught. Like you would literally like try to snag the rock because that commotion of that bait, like, and I show it every time I inadvertently snag in those tanks on those seminars. It's like you see that snag bait, like you think most of us would probably think, oh, your bait's out of play, right? Like I'm snagged, like I'm screwed. But if you actually watch the bait while you're trying to shake it free, dude, it's doing all kinds of wild stuff.
Yeah.
And what happens? I'm like, all right, what do you guys see in the tank? My bait's stuck, right? What is every fish within 6 feet of it doing right now? They're all nose down on it,
Yeah.
just waiting for it to make a move.
Yep.
And the moment you pop that thing free, one of them just smokes it.
Yeah. Dude,
And
that's so crazy. True. I was just thinking about, sorry, I kind of interrupted you there, but I fished the 8-inch mag in a video last year, and I was casting up against a seawall, and of course seawall is going to have some dock pilings out from it, and sure enough got hung on one of those dock pilings, and I'm just sitting there, doing the typical, trying to pop it free, and it's exactly what you said, man. I mean, it finally kind of like got close, popped it free, and it was like, I mean, immediate, boom,
immediate.
and I set the hook, and the fish had already ran like 8 feet with it. Like he was that quick. I mean, and exactly what you're saying. He was probably just sitting down there, probably with 3 or 4 others, and just watching it, just waiting for it. So that's insane, but it makes sense.
And it took me a couple of years to come to this conclusion. It's like, well, shoot, man, every time that happens, we get bit. Why am I not trying to mimic that when I'm not snagged?
You don't want to lose it. It's hard because you don't want to lose that bait, but at the same time.
Well, I'm just talking about like open water conditions, right? Like sand bottom, mud bottom, places where it's actually almost impossible to snag something. Yeah. I just started ripping that thing vertically to try to duplicate that. And man, you're welcome, people.
Yeah.
Enjoy.
Yeah.
It's pretty wild what you can figure out to trigger responses from these fish. And people love to rely on others to shorten this very steep learning curve at times. And I get it. Like, if I came up in this generation, I'd probably fall victim to the same kind of trap, in my opinion. I think it's a trap. It's so much easier to access information these days than when I was growing up, right? Everything was a secret when I grew up.
Yeah.
Nobody was giving out information for free.
Yeah.
Right? Like guys.
No, I'll show you what I paid for it. These awesome suckers right here,
man. I read every single one of those books in that series.
Yeah, but these are freaking awesome. I mean, old school is all get out. I still have every Bassmaster magazine I ever kept. I literally have probably 50 VHS tapes sitting right here that I can't get rid of them. My wife's like, you need to just trash those. Don't be a hoarder. I'm like, that's my childhood, like, learning. I recorded every Bassmaster, every FLW. Like, I recorded all this stuff, and I watched it time and time and time again at night. Like, that, like you said, that's what you had to do. You had to pick up on these little things after watching 100 times. Now you can just YouTube, Google anything you want, and it's right there at your fingertips. But man, it is crazy how it's changed.
And just keep this in mind, because I feel like I'm speaking to a younger, more inexperienced version of myself, right? Like, everything in that book can be absolutely impactful in your fishing, but don't look at it as the absolute truth, right? Utilize insight from content you're able to digest, especially on your platforms. Like you do a better job of explaining technicality in fishing than just about anybody I've come across. And dude, as a creator myself, like, I don't watch anybody's stuff because like it burns me out. Like you get it. Like we're surrounded by it. Like I can't get it. I got freaking baits like in front of me all over the place everywhere I go. And like the last thing I want to do is look at more fishing content.
Mm-hmm.
But I watch your videos because even like you've shown to me that you think outside that box too. So I can gather insight from another out of the box thinker to add to my game. So all of you guys that may be new to bass fishing, always take what you digest with a grain of salt, and just don't take it as the absolute truth. Utilize it as a foundation to inspire you, uh, but don't be afraid to experiment like outside of that. Tweak an idea, try something, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But man, what if you discover something crazy that nobody else has? Like, to me, that's the discovery is the magical part of the fishing, not taking somebody else's info and duplicating it. Like, I think that's lame.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, there's so many small nuances. Like you were just talking about getting snagged and popping that free. You know, there's a lake that I fish all the time. It's very known that the smallmouth there eat a tube jig. You know, like you catch them on a tube jig. You can catch them from April all the way through the end of the year on a tube jig, but usually about August and September, those fish get a little bit tough to be caught on a tube jig. And I have figured out, and like, I don't want to say it, but it's also not like super crazy, like secretive, is that you can be dragging that tube jig across the bottom, and you, just like you said, just pop that thing as hard as you can off the bottom 3 or 4 times, and you're going to catch the biggest ones that are in that school of fish. That there's probably 4 or 5 of them looking at it the whole time. And like you said, you know, you don't always. I figured that out by literally getting hung, popping it free, and then starting to do it. And like my buddy has always been like, dude, this time of year, August, September, I'll be just popping that thing crazy all the time. And you just figure out those little things throughout years and years of fishing. And like you said, I think it's best to take this stuff with a grain of salt and like use it as a foundation, but never, never think that it's a textbook. Like never think that it's 100% the truth. Because like you said, you could easily stumble upon something, like you said, burning this sucker. Not many people, like I'm indulged in the bass fishing world, and I wouldn't have thought about burning this, like you just talked about. And so that is just, you never know when you're going to find something that can make a difference, whether it's just catching fish for fun, or maybe it's a tournament situation, like whatever it may be. It's always good to just experiment a little bit. Like at least give yourself, 20% of your day, 30% of your day, like just to do something different, oddball. And I think that that's really a good thing to just do every single time you go out there. Give yourself 20% of a day to do something out of the character, out of line.
Yeah, FOMO is a real factor in fishing, right? Like if I go back past 10, 12 years that I've been able to do this full time, like, dude, I worked a 40 to 60 hour a week job. Right? At the most, I can get out twice a week on the weekends. So most people have a finite amount of time to go fishing. So I understand sticking to what works to make the most out of your limited time. But I think if you do it enough, even in that limited capacity, you're going to reach a plateau where you're like, man, I've caught those fish doing the same thing for X amount of time. Like, let me try something else. 20%, I think, is definitely more than enough. Like, most of us fish 6 to 10 hours on those limited days. Try something weird for 1 to 3 hours of that day.
Yep.
But don't do it like when the fishing is terrible, right? Like,
exactly.
Like you're not going to have a realistic, result in your scientific experiment if you're going to try things when those fish are the least active, right? In that mid-morning lull where you can't get bit doing anything. So don't pick up your new bait that you just picked up from the expo or from, this podcast or something else where you're inspired, and try it at the absolute worst time. Right? Try it when that window is a little bit more open.
Yeah.
Right? And just check and see if that crazy idea has got any weight behind it. And that's something you can build off of. And, especially early in the morning, you see it with big bait guys. And someone is fishing a club tournament, for example. And, man, I just bought my first big swim bait. I'm going to chuck this thing and catch my kicker and win big bass or whatever. And dude, after the first 10 minutes of the morning, they were already spun out. They just, like, fishing is such a mental exercise. and I've watched so many men crumble. Like they just crumble to their, their self promised, commitment. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do that, and they pick up whatever it is
Yep.
instead, and they
Yep.
don't give it a shot. And it's kind of sad to see, and it's kind of wild because I mean I get it. Trust me, I get it. I was that guy too for a long time, but I've seen the light. Like it has been highly beneficial for my life and lifestyle and fishing, to try something different. You talked about how great a chatterbait works, and it still does. But you want to talk about one of my home lakes that gets pounded every other weekend with the ABA team tournament and all the recreational pressure, this, that, and a third. My buddy and his partner dominated that trail with the jackhammer when the jackhammer is new for like 2.5, 3 years. They won Angler of the Year every year. They won like every other tournament, top three. They were just jackhammer and a Zacho, burning the bank, like stupid fishing, like fun, right?
Yeah.
Like it's brainless. Just go out there and just
Cover
throw a
water.
shallow cover, trolling motor on high, and just freaking slack line. Oh, there's one. And then they stopped biting it.
Jeez.
And it's funny because they were the only ones that really got on that bite. They kept that a secret for a good amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
They do the old school misdirection and have all the other baits tied on the deck. But dude, they threw that thing almost 80% of the time. Uh, and then when we got on with Rather Outdoors, which is Strike King, Lose, Quantum, Zebco, Mach, I was like, oh, they got a vibrating jig of their own, Thunder Cricket. All right, let me try these. And we went out there. We fished the lead version first because it was a little cheaper. So I bought a couple of those first. And dude, they started slacklining that thing.
Crazy.
And my boys could not believe it. I'm like, come on, go get on the boat. And dude, I was fishing like their ugly, like Bass Magic swim bait as a trailer. You know what that thing is? It's like a bass style,
Yep.
like really rigid version though. And you literally swim it next to the boat, and the tail does nothing. It literally did nothing.
Supposed
And
to kick there.
it's supposed to kick, but you know what though? Those fish ate the crap out of it. So that's all I cared about,
Yeah.
right? And they were testing that bite. They'd put on their jackhammer with their Zacho, and fish alongside or behind me or whatever. And dude, that Thunder Cricket whooped their asses.
Wow.
And even that weird Bass Magic trailer, they're used to seeing a bait doing all kinds of cool stuff in the water, right? Like action is very subjective. Just keep that in mind. When the Huddleston first came out, nobody bought it because it didn't swim.
Mm.
But it's caught more double-digit bass than any lure ever.
Gosh. Yeah.
Shouldn't that be what matters?
Absolutely.
Right? So like we kept wearing him out on that Bass Magic trailer until he stopped biting it because we wore out our own fish.
Yeah.
All right. So that's what I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just about to say, that what you talked about earlier, wearing out your own fish, that's basically what your buddies did. They wore out their fish, and it's so easy for us as anglers, to think that the bass have moved, or that they've left, or that they've gone. And sometimes, yeah, that obviously happens, but sometimes they're there, and it's really about just minor changes. Like you look at all the big bass studies that have been done out there, and a lot of bass around the world have like home ranges. They only have a certain area that they are even going to be in. Now some bass are completely different. They're going to travel miles throughout the year, but a lot of bass have a home range, and so they're going to be in those same areas, and when they stop biting your jackhammer, you think they're gone. But then what happens? Someone comes behind you doing something completely different. For example, literally just throwing a Thunder Cricket. So it's just going to have a slightly different vibration, and it's like the bite all of a sudden starts again. And it's just crazy that happens all the time.
So in that same scenario, in an example, they stopped biting the regular lead Thunder Cricket, so we went to the tungsten. And whatever that difference is made a difference because they would eat it again. And every time they slowed down eating it, we would just change the trailer out. Right. And then once we went through that whole rotation, then I'd start playing with the skirt.
Gosh.
And then once you go through that, you go back to like a stealth blade chatterbait or the big blade. Like
Yeah.
there's always an adjustment.
Yeah.
Those fish would continue to bite a vibrating jig, even though they would stop eating a specific one or a specific combo.
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyways, we could talk about this forever.
Yeah, we could. And it's already been a good amount of time here, but man, it's really been awesome. Talking about a lot of big bait stuff. One thing I did want to talk about real quick before I let you go, because I know it's getting late and you got a lot of fishing ahead of you here. Not tonight. Well, maybe you'll sling that thing around there if those
I'm trying to
storms.
talk myself into getting up at like 5 or 6 to explore this morning window,
Yeah.
and I'm not a morning guy, so that's
Oh
a
yeah.
big ask of myself.
Well, maybe you'll do it. But the one thing I did want to ask you, especially when it came to glide baits and swim baits in general, and I think you kind of answered it a little bit already. But really, there are so many glide baits in that like really 6 to 9, 10-inch range. I feel like a lot of guys throw, and it's like, is there anything ever that you look at that are like they'll eat the 7-inch today versus the 9-inch, or the 9-inch versus 7-inch, or kind of like what we've talked about? Does it come down to just, hey, I'm just gonna throw some stuff out there, experiment a little bit, and just let the bass talk?
What's beautiful and equally frustrating simultaneously in fishing is that every one of these bodies of water is its own unique environment with its own unique culture, right? Like these fish are largemouth, smallmouth, and spots everywhere we go. But do they all respond to different things or don't respond to different things?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the way that I try to figure out these new bodies of water is by utilizing the most information available to me. That's why like understanding the biology of that lake is the first thing. Like what's swimming in this lake behind me?
Yeah.
Okay, what is probably dominating their prey like forage base? And then matching the hatch, not only in like being species specific, and I think that's a trap where a lot of guys fall down this rabbit hole of like trying to have like uber realistic lures, thinking that this realistic crawdad is going to catch them. When my experience has shown me that a very abstract creature style or crawbait gets bit way better in most scenarios, is a great place to start, right? Like even like the capsize, like that could look like an aloe-wave, that could look like a threadfin shad, that could look like a gizzard. We have an amazing real perch pattern, an amazing ghost gill pattern. I like lures that have a little bit more abstract to them, because they can be interpreted by us and the fish as different options. Even that 210, right? Like that's roughly a trout profile,
Mm-hmm.
but you're holding up a ghost carp color, it looked like, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that could mimic a golden shiner, that could be a sucker, that could be these invasive, what are these European things called on Champlain? There's like a roach. Like it could be a multitude of things. So that opens up the world of possibility in our minds to allow us to tie it on with some sort of confidence. And if they are hyper focused on something that they can get, if they're on an aloe-wave spawn and they only want to eat like real silvery baits, you can really whittle down your options quickly. And then understanding the size of the fish present in your system. Like what's winning big fish in a derb around here? Oh, it's a 5-pounder. Okay, that's a big one. Or if it's a 4, then I probably won't go past the 7-inch size. Unless I really want to just conduct a wild experiment and see if there's a class of fish in here that nobody knows exists because no one's targeting them. There's that too, right? And it always comes down to what your goals are. Like, do you just want to go out there and catch a bunch of fish? Do you want to catch 5 fish to be competitive in a tournament setting, or do you just want to catch the one?
Yeah.
One is different everywhere you go, right? We documented a 712 a month ago here on Champlain. Dude, at home, I'd shake those things off. But up here, like that's a fish of a lifetime.
That's a giant.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anywhere in the north, that's huge.
No, totally, right? So context matters. Yeah, it depends on what your goals are. If you just want to catch them, start smaller. If you want to catch the one, start bigger.
Yeah.
But be willing to eat a pile of humble pie. Like,
Yeah, that's the one thing I know enough about the big baits. The bigger the big baits, like that is a difficult. You really have to be hardwired for that. You know, watching some of those guys that they just throw a big bait all day, and they are looking for one bite, but it might take 2-3 days, you know, to get that bite. That is a hard thing to do. I know for me, it's very difficult.
it is tough, man. And let's use a recent a reference point. When we went to Cayuga, you know, that lake is apparently capable of kicking out 12 pounders as of last year, breaking the New York state record, right? Like,
Crazy.
which stood at like 10 and a half. I think maybe since like the late 70s or something, which is still a giant fish for the North.
Mhm.
But to see a 12.6 or whatever it was come out in July last year, it was like mind blowing. And I'm like, whoa, like I knew my chances of getting bit on a big bait here were already pretty good, but
Mhm.
like it just opened wide up coming into this. But we get on the water and, you know, we're dealing with these same up and down, you know, weather systems. You know, we got there, water temp in the upper part of the lake was 53. Over a week and a half, it got up to 67, and then it
Mm.
went backwards back to like 52.
Jeez.
And, you know, varying weather conditions are always going to make fish a pain in the ass, like,
Yeah.
frankly. And one of my guys was fishing the new Black Spirit Chapter 1 glide bait, which is what we had at that Columbus Fishing Expo, um, and was catching good fish on them. You know, 4.5 to 5 3/4 pound fish on that new 10. I'm sorry, it's 9.5 inches, 4 ounces in weight. So it's a substantial size glide bait, especially
That's a
for
good.
that region. But he's only catching like 1 to 4 a day.
Hmm.
Versus, you know, we're catching 20, 30 fish on the better days, on the between the 6 inch capsize, between a tungsten thunder cricket with the Biwa scorpitail trailer. And if you haven't tried that trailer as a, or that bait as a trailer, bro, I think you'll like it, because I see you like throwing soft jerk baits.
Yeah, I think I got one over there yet. I got one over there on my wall right here.
Yeah, it's got a very unique bulbous tail. So in the water, like on a straight retrieve, it's got like its own little like wag and rhythm. But like where it really shines is when you're fishing around grass, especially, and you feel that grass catch your blade and you go to clear your bait. And this is part of why we fish smooth casting braid to a short fluoro leader, because it's so much easier to clear that bait because of the lack of stretch from that grass than it is fishing straight fluoro. We've been actually going back and experimenting with a lot of straight fluoro lately to see how uh, it would maybe help our landing percentages on these big northern smallmouth, because
Hmm.
they are the hardest fighting, most acrobatic, ridiculously athletic bass I've ever encountered. Those St. Lawrence River, Lake Ontario fish are next level at getting off.
Yeah.
But, you know, trying to clear grass on a thunder cricket with straight fluoro was like 5 times more work than just popping your rod tip down and hitting your reel simultaneously just to pop that grass clear. When you do that with that scorpitail and you're watching your bait within visual range, you actually see it go from center and it kicks so much further out because it doesn't have that drag like a paddle tail swim bait, or even a more bulbous or a fat body like a Zaco would have.
Hmm.
And that clearing motion definitely is a trigger. And once again, clear the bait when you're not hung.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, once you realize these triggering mechanisms, you can duplicate them over and over. And we were catching so many of those same size fish and even bigger ones on that mid-sized swim bait and that
Hmm.
combo. And then we actually started catching them. Uh, I was just casting a 5/8 ounce, 3/4 ounce bullet weight unpegged with a creature bait, because I knew those fish uh, kind of stopped reacting to the moving bait. If I could just get a bait in front of them, maybe you know, we get a couple of those fish to eat. And dude, like the second cast, I just, you know, random cast out into this big grass flat, hits the bottom. And what's happening when people don't realize, like, I don't like pegging my bullet weights. Like I never have. Like I grew up feeling like I was the best Texas rig fisherman in California as a young, arrogant kid. Right? It was a 3/16 ounce lead brown bullet weight with a 6-inch straight tail hand poured worm with
Yeah.
1/0 offset worm hook. And I'd fish on 6-pound maxima and 8-pound maxima. And after I got my ass kicked by some of these bigger fish, I went to 10 and 12.
Yeah.
But what I didn't realize was the dynamic that free sliding bullet weight creates.
Yep.
I don't want that weight directly attached to that bait like you would with a skirted jig. Like, if I want that dynamic, I'm going to tie on a skirted jig,
Yep.
right? Or just a fixed jig head.
Yep.
The advantage that I didn't realize that free sliding weight had was I can still bomb it on a long cast. It hits the water, and the weight immediately plummets to the bottom. But if you give it a little bit of slack, your bait is actually trailing behind and above it. So now you've got like a weightless presentation on that initial descent to the bottom. You can accelerate it by bringing it tight, right? But I started just kind of letting that initial entry, because of what we also saw, my buddy was scoping them with that glide bait. And every time he'd throw that glide bait over, those fish were actually attracted to that splash at the time. It's not always the case. There are a lot of situations where they spook from it. But during that window, they were absolutely drawn to it. So I think that bigger Texas weight got their attention initially. And by allowing a little bit of slack line, not like slack, like I still can feel some tension, but I'm not just pulling that bait straight to the bottom to meet the weight. I'm getting a lot of bites on that first initial fall because their attention is now directed towards the entry of the weight. Now they just see this freaking craw coming down, and then usually it was like the first or second hop. Dunk.
Yep.
Dude, we had 30 bag, which I think is pretty good up here, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And dude, they were crushing it too, like dunk. And fish that we were still catching that day on the moving baits, you wouldn't even feel them eat it. They would just kind of be there and they'd be barely hooked. So being a little bit more flexible allowed us to experience a pretty phenomenal day.
Yeah. I remember I went to a bass university when I believe that when Bassmaster was actually putting them on, or Bassmaster University, whatever it was called. And Denny Brower was there. This was like just after I got my license. I mean, I was probably 16 or 17, so almost 20 years ago. I mean, I'm 35. And I remember going there and listening to Denny Brower talk about a Texas rig and flipping primarily. And I'll never forget, he said, if you don't absolutely need to peg a Texas rig weight, don't do it. He's like, you will get more bites. And he explained exactly what you're talking about.
Fascinating.
And saying, literally, if it's not absolutely necessary, just do not do it. The weight is really great for allowing you to pitch into areas, and it's going to be a little bit more of a pain to fish at times, but you will get way more bites. And it's so true. I mean, like you said, there is a small separation in that bait, and that weight's going to hit the bottom, and your bait may be, even at times, it may only be a foot above the weight. But that last descent, which is primarily where bass are going to get it, is a very free-falling, natural descent. And that's when so many bass get it right then and there when you pick up. And so I'll never forget that. And ever since then, I've always had that mindset. And then I remember it was years later. I remember Ish Monroe listening to a online bass university after they kind of took over things. And he said the exact same thing. And so it's just, to me, that's what I've always done as well. Is like, if you don't absolutely need to peg that Texas rig weight, don't do it. Like, you will get so many more bites. So that's strong.
It's always cool to hear those kind of corresponding ideas, especially from someone like an OG like Denny Brower and yourself. All right, like I love to see people coming to similar conclusions through their own experiences. And here's one I'm curious about. What do you think about this whole free rig, trend? Like, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think at first I thought that it was basically like an unpegged Texas rig. But I looked at it under the water, and it's basically doing what we're talking about, but it just like it does it that much more, because a Texas rig, that weight, if it's a 1/4 ounce weight, it might be 3/8 of an inch, a half inch long at most, depending on what weight, you're using, if it's lead, and that's going to have some friction going down the line. But a free rig, obviously, it just has the one like metal loop. So that bait really, that weight really can get a lot of separation. So I think it's just primarily a little bit more separation that is happening, and it might just give it that much more of that free fall, kind of like what we're talking about, where it allows that bait to be a little bit more free down there on the bottom. Obviously, a teardrop style weight is a little bit more popular with that technique too, which if you think about a teardrop versus the bullet weight, like it does kind of keep it up off the bottom a little bit more. So I think that's going to allow that bait to pivot, roll almost along the bottom. Again, it's probably just a more natural action. But if you think about, like, I've been thinking about this a lot lately, because bass fishing, like some of the best producing lures of all time, all have like weightlessness to them. You think about the good old wacky rig, like it's a weightless presentation, and there's a lot of baits that are like that. One that is really kind of, I've been probably diving into a lot lately over the last year, is like that cover scat style bait, that like depths cover scat. There's the G crack, what is it, the I'm a Kamuchi Duchi, whatever, it's got the tentacles and stuff. But that heavy plastic style bait that is fished weightless is so effective. It's very hard to fish. It's a super slow technique, but I think that is like the wave of the future. Like, you see a lot of guys in Japan fishing a lot of these weightless techniques really, really deep. Like they'll fish in 20, 25 foot of water with that weightless plastic, and they're waiting forever. Like I watch this guy all the time from Japan. I mean, his one cast it'll be 7 minutes. Like it is the longest cast. And you think about guys like Aaron Martins. I remember Aaron Martins saying the exact same thing when he fished like Mississippi, and he found that huge school on the Mississippi River or something like that nobody had found. Like he was fishing a drop shot, which obviously he was known for, but at a snail's pace, like as slow as you can. And one thing I noticed about Aaron Martins too, anytime he would say what size weight that he was using on a drop shot, it was always like an 1/8 to a 1/4 ounce lighter than what I thought I would have used in the same situation. And I think, again, it just having having that less of a weight on a drop shot, it just gives those baits so much more freedom and action. Just kind of like what you were saying earlier when you were talking about monofilament and using a smaller diameter mono. It just gives that bait so much more movement, more action. It just looks so much more natural. And I think that is, with how pressured our bodies of water are, how clear our bodies of water are, like I only think that kind of stuff is going to be continuing to get stronger with more weightless, very slow presentations.
Yeah, it's fascinating, man. Like I still geek out on trying to create new presentations and think outside the box. Like I literally just unboxed a whole bunch of core tackle accessories. Like I don't know how much of that stuff you've been playing with, but
yeah,
it's allowing me to present these baits in like totally different ways than I would. Like this Ozark rig. Have you messed with this thing?
Yeah, I have some. It's very unique. It's just something different. It's just something different.
No, I love what those guys are doing, and it kind of complements all of these baits that we now have under our Big Bass Streams umbrella between the 3 different brands that we have ownership in. Like we even have like a poop style bait, like you described with that cover scat. Ours is called a patate. It means potato, right? And it's just like a nub of plastic. And I haven't fished it yet, just because I mean that's probably gonna be the last thing I'm gonna go to personally for the style of fishing that I like to do. But I was talking to one of our team members the other day, and he's like, "Dude, that white one was the only thing these smallies would eat on this big shallow flat one day. They wouldn't eat it was crazy." And I was like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah, there's just something about it. Like you said, it's either probably unassuming, and they just eat that style of bait in these certain scenarios when they won't respond to traditional bait."
Yeah. I did a podcast with Kenta Kimura like a year and a half ago, and he at the time he got a top, I want to say a top 5 finish in a Bassmaster Open on Oneida, and he was fishing. It was, I believe, it was the Berkeley. It can only be found in Japan. It's like a Berkeley spider type bait. It's like one of those. It's the same heavy plastic style bait. It's not poop style. It's more like if you see it, it looks like these little legs, and it's like a spider. But he got a top 10, and the thing about those baits, which I find super intriguing, is that I've caught a lot of smallmouth on that bait, and it's like heavy tackle on that thing.
Yeah.
Like I use 16-pound test. Kenta was using 20-pound test, a bait caster. So it's such a unique way of fishing, and it's almost like you're finessing with really heavy tackle. So it's just super cool to me.
Yeah, a bait that I have not ever seen anybody outside of Southern California fishing is a Yamamoto Ika, the fat Ika. Are you familiar with that thing?
I think I know which one you're talking about.
So, I mean, now that I think about it, we've been fishing a poop style bait for 30 years in SoCal, right? It's got that same bulbous body with the hula skirt on one end. It looks like a pineapple or like an upside down palm tree or something. And we would rig it weightless on a 5/0 extra wide gap hook.
Yeah.
And like you said, it would just take forever to fish, and like a 7-minute cast would probably be a short one.
Yeah.
Like, it was almost like fishing bait.
Yeah.
And it's a great shore fishing lure for that reason, because you could just marinate that thing on your limited, access, and big fish would crush it, and they would eat it doing nothing.
Isn't that crazy? The thing that I've noticed too about that style of bait is, like, at least for me, you don't often feel a bite. I don't get it. Like, it's most of the time when I've caught them on it, it's you're working it across the bottom at a snail's pace, and you'd think you'd feel this like line throttling throughout the thing, and it's not that. Like, almost every single time I just go to continue working the bait, and my line is just going the opposite way. And I don't.
Yeah, I've observed the same thing, especially with better quality fish. Like that big dock monster I caught yesterday on that Ned rig on my BFS. I never felt it thump it, and I'm fishing braid to like 2 foot of 9-pound leader.
Yeah.
Like, you would assume a fish like that, and dude, it was hooked perfectly in like the roof of the mouth, like, so she had to punch it or something. But bigger fish especially have historically been pressure bites. And a lot of these, like, yesterday I had a fish knock my soul out of my body yesterday on that thunder cricket, because it was tough yesterday. We were fishing hard, and this fish hit this freaking thunder cricket so freaking hard, like, and then Riley said she was embarrassed for me when I lifted this 2-pounder up. She's like, "You look like such a kid." Like,
she gives you a hard time, it sounds like.
I mean, that's their job, right?
Yeah.
Someone's got to keep me in check.
That's right. That's right. That's what a good woman does. Yeah. Got to make fun of you every now and then too.
It's my first one, so I'm still learning.
Oh man. Well, man, it's already been a great podcast. I don't want to keep you up late, especially you got to get up at about 4 a.m. You got about 6 hours of sleep here coming up. So
the nice thing about being on the water is I can just pull up on the dock, tie it off, and come take a nap.
Yeah, that's very true. That's awesome.
So I think that's going to be the game plan. But I appreciate it, man. I know we didn't get to everything on the list, but if you get bandwidth, I'd love to come back on. I enjoy talking bass fishing with like-minded individuals. So this has been fun.
No, absolutely. We're definitely going to get through this list of questions. This will be a 2-parter easily. So we'll continue on here. But man, I'd love to have you on soon. And it's been awesome, man. This is great.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we should probably do it after my next St. Lawrence River stint, because I have ideas brewing in my head about how I catch more of those 7-pounders and hopefully, catch some bigger ones. Like Riley cracked her PB on the last day of that Canadian pre-spawn season they have. I think it shut down May 10th. And she had some high 6s on that 6-inch capsize. And then I was actually catching them on the BS trout. You ever throw like those hard body multi-segmented, like honestly corny looking, like cheap assuming baits? I mean, that's where my mind was when I came across this thing.
Yeah.
Dude, I've been busting their ass on it because I started thinking about like, well, it's such a overlooked and dismissed category of lure. Like, when have these fish seen it? They
Yeah,
haven't.
that's super true.
And it doesn't
That's
look bad in the water. It's actually really fluid. I can burn it. I can hit it with like little bursts of speed, like to kind of mimic that, like coming off center, like a vibrating jig. And do big largemouth up there, we're cracking it, and big smallmouth we're cracking. I missed one probably about 6 3/4 to 7 right at the boat because I got too damn
gee.
excited. You know that water there is so clear, you see them coming for yards.
Yeah.
Oh crap! Look at this one! Look at this one! And I saw that mouth open up, and even after all this time, got a little too trigger happy.
Well, I'm glad you're that way. I lost a fish in our Tuesday night tournament, and it was that same scenario. Had a glide bait, fish came up, and I seen it open his mouth, and I set the hook, man. I had it pegged for a split second.
Oh,
Like I think I set the hook and then felt the bite. Like it was that type of deal.
yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
dadgummit, like I messed that up bad. So
So here's a freebie for you guys. All right, and this has been true with the capsize, the thunder cricket, and the bird, and the Magnum 4.0 square bill from striking. Those have been the 4 best lures for us in 2025.
yeah,
Don't swing, wind, set, wind
mindset.
through the bite.
That's hard for me.
It is, especially if you're like a slackliner, if you fish predominantly straight mono fluoro. If you start messing with the braid, especially, but even like fluoro, uh, try to wind those fish onto that hook, especially if you're fishing with any type of speed or momentum, like that bird. If like they're eating it like on a straight retrieve, if you swing, you're gonna do yourself a disfavor because you're probably gonna miss that fish, like you just described. And then worse yet, you're going to pull it out of the strike zone for a follow-up bite.
Mm,
And that's what I
100.
did in that moment because I was already at the boat. I had no more chance at redemption. So
Yeah,
if you just wind through, and especially if you're fishing around smaller schooling fish, those smaller ones are the more aggressive ones. They usually take the first stab at it. Let
yeah,
those guys bounce off. Because when a real one eats any of these baits, they're going to get it. And
yeah,
once you feel that pressure through the handle, I just continue to wind, and then you can lean into it with the rod simultaneously to
yeah,
drive that hook point. And the key is to not stop winding to create that penetration and maintain it. I
yeah,
see so many people that get bit, swing hard. They might crank once or twice, and then they do this like weird like pause and hold to check. And in that moment, that momentum of your hook coming this way stops.
mm,
They literally fall out of their mouths a lot of times. Or you don't get enough penetration to get it past the barb. And on
yeah,
that first jump, goodbye. So try
yeah.
that.
No, that's phenomenal advice. It's definitely advice that hits home for me. I mean, I love to set the hook hard. I've always had to gear my tackle because I know I set the hook hard. I mean, I did a video on a Bronco bug here recently, and you look, there's about 30 comments with 50 likes on them a piece that are all like, "Bro, chill on the hook set there." But I something that really is interesting today, this morning, I've even put this video out on Bass Fishing HQ, but I did some bank fishing with a glide bait.
Go.
And I was super, I was never in the position because I was surrounded by so many trees to set the hook. So when I got bit, it was a reel and just kind of more or less just not even pull. I mean, you're just kind of reeling and kind of lifting. And there was 3 fish that I caught, and they were hooked great through, perfectly that I did that. And there was 1 fish that I tried to set the hook on hard and missed him. And so it's exactly what you're like. I had him for a split second again. So it's just exactly what you're saying. Just it's almost like topwater fishing where you just kind of keep working the bait,
That's
and
right.
just wait till you feel that weight. But
It was a huge adjustment for me too because I came from that generation where monofilament was the only option. So you had to swing on them to accommodate for that stretch. But as the tackles changed, it's become apparent to me and proven that my suck percentage goes way down if I stop swinging on them in certain applications. It's not across the board.
Yeah.
right? We're frog fishing, we're flipping a jig, Texas rig fishing. Like we're still cracking them.
Yeah.
But moving baits, hard baits, especially, uh, stop swinging on them, especially on the big size, right? Like the glide bait stuff, man. Like if you guys get bored of watching good content on Tyler's platforms, you can come over to mine to watch some really guerrilla stuff, especially back in the day, and you can see this evolution in mechanics. And one of the things that I've benefited from, and I'm sure you've observed this, is when you have someone that films themselves so much, you watch yourself more than any fisherman prior to our generation ever has.
Mm-hmm.
And what I paid attention to is when I messed it up, like what went wrong there. And I
Mm-hmm.
try to make adjustments, and I test things. And if it works, I can add that to my bag. And this is where a lot of the not swinging on fish in specific scenarios with specific lures, with specific line and rod ratings came into play. I started diminishing the amount of missed bites, lost fish, and just fish stories.
Mm.
And it's been proven. Mechanics are huge in what we do. Uh, it's tough to overcome years of muscle memory,
Yeah.
right? Like I had a guy yesterday swing on a couple of those capsize bites, fishing straight fluoro. I mean, his rod tip just went boom, like I mean, big bites, and he swung. And every time he swung, he missed those fish. And every time he actually had the discipline to wind through the bite, he hooked them and landed
Yeah.
them. And it's like, damn, like it's just a tough thing to overcome. But as much as I love to crack them, and trust me, I love to crack them, I like catching them more. And you'll see in those early years of the glide bait fishing, I swung on every one of them, right? But you also notice how many of those fish were hooked with just a back hook,
Mm.
hooked on just a back hook with one point, and how many more bloopers there were. Okay, and fishing in Austin, I'd fish these bridges and these big concrete pilings, and I'd have to make some pretty long casts, right, to stay off those fish after I plucked off all the stupid, aggressive ones. And I'd feel that big 10, 11-inch glide bait sweep, 2 to 4 feet one way or the other, and then occasionally you feel it bump the concrete. And then there's this one cast where it sticks out on my mind. I'm under the Mopac Bridge on Lady Bird Lake, and I make this big glide, and I'm like, was that the piling? And I hesitate, right? And I go to glide it again, and it's just like a soft pull glide presentation I had at the time, and it comes, under pressure. And I was just like, I wind into it. I'm like, oh, dude, that's a fish. And that epiphany hit me in that moment, right? And this is the thing, like, I wish I could attribute a lot of these discoveries to like some like wizardry or like some next level thinking. Dude, it's just observation from lots of time on the water
Mm-hmm.
and identifying scenarios like this. And I was like, dude, this fish had the front treble in the corner of the mouth and that back treble like on the side of its face or something.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you want to hook them.
Yep.
You don't want that back treble in the corner of the mouth or in their mouth barely hooked on. You want both trebles buried. And you want that front treble hooked to that fish so you actually have more control and less of that big ass glide bait or soft bait creating fighting the pressure of the water to aid that fish to get that hook out of its face. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And I had that experiment with myself and my clients at that time. Stop freaking swinging on these glide bait bites. And dude, the numbers of fish that were hooked the old way with one hook went to almost none. And I started hooking more of them with both trebles, and obviously I'm going to land more of those fish.
Yeah.
So it's a big mechanic that I emphasize when someone new gets on the Dream Machine, when they're on a training session, they want to learn how to fish that bait or any bait where that sweep set or wind set is beneficial to our success. You are not allowed to set the hook. And they're like,
Yeah.
what? But I always have a why. All right.
Yeah.
And that's something I enjoy about your content. You go into the why, right? Like
Yep.
I watch you do a video on the X Zone. What's their soft jerk bait? I should know because we were on their staff for a year.
I got it over here hanging on the wall, but I can't remember the name of it either.
Yeah, but you're showing how you're winding that thing, burning it, and then killing it, and like why it's so effective. But that's the thing, you talk about the why, right? If someone can give you an answer or tell you something and they can support it with a solid why, at least make it plausible. I'll entertain that idea and I'll take it and experiment with it myself. But if they just tell you that you should never fish a chatterbait with fluorocarbon without telling me a why, bro, your shit just went out the window. I don't give a crap what you have to say.
Yeah.
You have to tell me why.
Yeah. I've always thought I'm the same way. I always like to know the why. The one why I don't think I will ever understand is a floating worm. Like I love the floating worm technique. And
Interesting.
if you use a bubblegum worm, or a methylate worm, there is nothing in nature that looks like that. Like there is nothing that even remotely looks like that. It is purely just bass are like, what the frick is that?
Yeah, no,
Like it has to
absolutely.
be.
That
Obviously go ahead.
that's a bait that I've never caught a bass on. So I'm fascinated by this conversation. So just please keep going. This is great.
Dude, I mean, it's a technique that it's floating worms are super old school. Like you'll hear a bunch of old school guys talk about it. And I got showed this technique a number of years ago by a local angler. And I was like, I always knew about it, but I didn't understand it. And I fished it. I was able to get a top 10 on Lake Norman, fishing a floating worm in the Bass Open.
Yeah.
And I love that bite, but I thoroughly don't understand why they eat it. I just know that, that right before spawn time and right after the spawn time and even during the spawn, they'll bite the crap out of that. And it's like my whole thing that I think is that you have bass in that pre-spawn to post-spawn time frame that are primarily shallow. And we know that as anglers, the two colors that bass can see the best are greens and reds. Like that's the spectrum that they can see the best and to see the most like colors within. Like they can see the difference between one green pumpkin versus another green pumpkin based upon their eyesight. And I think that with bass just being shallow, red is a color they can see. And I think that pink and that methylate is in that spectrum that they just see so well. And so I just think it's something that they're a little bit dumber in the springtime and that's the only why that I can think about. But besides that, I'm like, there's nothing. It doesn't look like anything. It glows in the dark pretty much. And they just clobber it, man. I love it so much.
That's awesome. I keep telling myself I'm going to play with that genre because like I said, I've never checked that off my list. Right. And, one thing that we've discovered playing with a bunch of overseas colors of the capsize and like trying to determine what we're going to bring to the U.S. market, we have been clobbering them on the pink.
The pink.
Dude.
That's the one, if you notice, the one that I don't have right now because it's rigged in my boat is the pink.
Okay. That's what's up. And I first started using it in smallmouth water.
Yep.
So like I didn't have a problem utilizing it in smallmouth water, but I was having a talk with the Beaver team worldwide, and I'm like, I don't know if pink's gonna play in a largemouth scene. Just that's from my own personal bias. And dude, I got like a 6.6 out of the St. Lawrence River, a largemouth on that pink, and a bunch of others along with that S trout, and I'm just like, dude, this is crazy. But like once again, who's throwing pink at these fish?
Yeah.
And like you said, that red is one of the first colors in the spectrum that gets filtered out by the water.
They can't see it past like 7-8 feet or something like that.
So it's like one of the few parts of the water column where they can actually see it. That's why when you see me doing our saltwater charters and we're catching all these deep water rockfish, a lot of them are oranges and reds because down there that's showing up as black, like they're camouflaged down there. But I want to give a shout out to young Oliver Haynes, who is actually from that Ohio area and actually helped us out at that expo last year before this current year's expo. And I met him at a Candlewood Fish Camp here on Champlain. And this kid had a pre-rigged worm. Like you're talking about old school, like this double single hook. And I was like, what is this kid doing? Right. And I've got all the cool stuff in the boat, obviously. We go into this grass flat on the inland sea. And he, starts to yapping his, my brain away, as young teenagers excited about fishing, so easily do, because I did the same thing. And dude, he caught like 3 fish on that thing. Like, hold on, what? I mean, he had the most confidence like ever. It's
Yeah.
the funniest thing. So like, he inspired me to want to try it. I just haven't actually like bought a pack and tied it on, but
Yeah.
I know it works.
Yeah. I mean, it goes back to what you were saying, take some of the stuff with a grain of salt and never forget. Dude, I'm sure the banjo minnow would clobber him right now. I mean,
Oh,
shoot.
1000%.
Yeah.
And
I bought,
here's something, I want everybody to pay attention to, man. Like, sure, it's good to have an awesome wand, but at the end of the day, I'll take the wizard over the wand.
mm,
Okay, this
nice.
can be a part of the puzzle that's missing, but from my observations, it's usually not.
Yes. You're right. 100%. It's all goes back to the wizard, Harry.
Yeah, give me a good angler that can catch a fish on anything before
Yeah.
the hot bait or whatever the hype is.
Yeah. I like that. Wizard and wand.
Be the wizard. Don't worry about the wands. You don't have to spend 2, 3, 4, $500 if you don't need to. Dude, I caught him on a glide bait that sells for $20 yesterday.
Oh yeah. I was gonna ask you about that. I was gonna ask you. I know that some of those, because there's $300, $400, $500, $600 swim baits all day long. But
Yeah. Let's leave that for the next one.
okay, okay. Well, good deal. I will. I'll let you go, man. This has been awesome. Such a cool conversation. Love listening to you. Love hearing you. OG on the tube, but just I love the multi-fish thing. I mean, I truly do. Like, I like to listen to that perspective, just because there's just so many different things that you learn that you can carry from. I mean, even species like a catfish at times. Like, you can carry things. Like, I used to love catfishing. Like, that was my first love in fishing, was catfish. And there's times where you will understand things more about bass from catfish and vice versa. So it's just cool.
No, the more fishing that you can dive into, the more perspective and experience you'll have to draw to add to your bass fishing. All right, funny little story. My first fish ever was a bullhead.
Oh yeah.
So I always have a soft spot in my heart for catfish of all kinds.
Yeah.
But when people would watch these early videos of me boat flipping these big bass, right? Like, thinking that I was a crazy psychopath bouncing fish up to 11 pounds, I've done a few times, right? They don't understand that I came from a saltwater fishing background where we fish a lot of 20 and 30 pounds. It's the same line that we throw big baits for. And I'd have to bounce like a 6 to 10 pound saltwater bass or a barracuda or a small yellowtail or something way up, this super high railing on a, charter boat. So that was a mechanic I was already very familiar with,
Yeah.
and understanding the limits of my tackle.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I couldn't even dock flip that 5.5 pounder on my BFS rig
Yeah.
because I understood the limitations of the tackle.
Yeah.
So, experiencing other styles of fishing teaches you things as simple as that. And like I talked about the muskie and pike fishing, that stuff, the barramundi fishing I did in Australia, Murray cod made me really comfortable with fishing higher test braids, the 80 and the 100 pound. For bass fishing applications, especially in shallow grass, for a lot of the same dynamics we talked about with fishing that thunder cricket in the grass. I could clear that defiant so much easier instead of straight fluoro. That's just a little spongy. I could rip it 6 feet and that grass is still on there. It's like, damn, that was a pain in the ass. So do as much fishing as you can, for everything. Catfish especially are dope.
Yeah. Love me a good catfish bite.
Oh, I
Everyone
got a
says they're
spot
ugly,
on
but I like them.
Cayuga, bro, and one of the ramps is plugged with bullheads. I was watching the locals hammering them. So if you want to have some fun.
Oh, really? That's awesome. Good old yellow belly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, nice, man. It's been awesome. I won't keep you up any longer. Let me know how you do tomorrow. And it's been awesome, man. It's been a great
Thanks, Tyler.
podcast.
Hey, man, I appreciate what you do for the culture, brother. You're doing it right, and I appreciate it.
Thanks, man. You're awesome. Appreciate you. Have a good one.